people are hungry for it. Governments are hungry for it.
When money is tight, oversight is that much more important. We've got an in-depth look at how the Washington State Auditor's Office works to ensure taxpayers get what they're paying for.
When we began the audit, it became very apparent, and they readily admitted they were not very good at this.
Then we'll dig deep into their cybersecurity division and the troubling scenarios they hope to avoid.
Can we get to your water system or in your the power grid?
With a significant state deficit and federal funding uncertainty, there's heightened interest on how tax dollars are being managed. The job of checking the receipts for government spending falls to the state auditor. The auditor's office conducts financial audits to ferret out fraud and waste at government entities of all sizes. The office also conducts performance audits on agencies and specific programs to measure success, spot shortcomings, and recommend solutions. We turn now to State Auditor Pat McCarthy and the agency's Director of Performance and IT Audits, Scott Frank. Thank you very much for your time today. Took me a second to get that out. Got quite the title. But the first question is actually for you, Auditor McCarthy. When you're looking at the books, when you're reviewing financial reporting of a publicly funded entity, where's that line between mismanagement and fraud?
Well, I think one of our mantras in the State Auditor's Office with our clients, and that's all of governments, whether you're a local government or a state agency, is to make sure that you have strong internal controls. You have strong internal controls, that's going to serve you well, leading your finance department. And we audit, and we have the fortune and the great legacy in the state of Washington to audit all of governments and to look at those. In the old time, they used to call it the county coffers, or the coffers, the books of local governments and state agencies, and we're going to tell you whether you have done what you have told your constituents or your citizens that you're supposed to do with their funds.
And the idea of accountability for public resources, public funds, that goes back to the founding of the state of Washington.
It is. And I think our forefathers decided that they wanted a separate elected that wasn't beholden to the state legislature, wasn't beholden just to the governor, but was beholden to the people of Washington state. So we have a strong legacy of accountability in this state and transparency, and I'm the 11th state auditor, so it's had a lot of longevity with the folks that have been in this position prior to me, and I think it has served us well in Washington state. That's not to say that there can't be fraud or misuse or abuse, because we look for that as well. But that is something that, because of our oversight, we provide that accountability. In fact, I tell local governments all the time, and state agencies, nobody can tell your story better than we can in the State Auditor's Office, because we look at everything. Now, not every audit do we look at every single thing. We have to make sure that we can cover a large agency like DSHS. We have a scope that we will look at, and then we'll come back and look at it again the next year and the next year. So if you ask governments in Washington state, they'll say they're audited a lot, and they are.
So then this question is really for both of you, so either can go first, but in recent years, the number of audits, the type of audits, so not just, first of all, there aren't just financial audits, there are performance audits.
Right.
And performance audits are a whole different animal. So the scope of those can grow with government, or emerging trends, things that are important. That I know that there are conversations that, with other states. So when they see something and then something comes to Washington, that's something that's on your radar. So I'm not sure who wants to get into performance audits first. I want to look at the scope of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Scott.
So when we're trying to figure out what kinds of performance audits we want to conduct, we're going to do quite a bit of outreach and sort of monitoring of the environment. So we're looking at what's going on in the news, what's going on with the legislature, we're monitoring what's going on with our colleagues in other states, and we're just generating lots of ideas about, well, what would make for value-added performance audits here in Washington. And then we're going to narrow that down, try and kind of achieve a balance where we're hitting all aspects of government every 2 years. Now, we're not going to get to every agency. We don't have enough bandwidth to do that, but just trying to make sure that we aren't just completely looking at one aspect, like, say, social services or something with transportation, but hitting everything. And then from that, we will end up with audits, and the ones we pick are the ones we think are most likely to yield recommendations that we think agencies or local governments will implement, because in the end, our goal is to make things work better through these audits.
And one of the audits that you looked at recently, or rather one of the issues you looked at, was sort of the performance of economic development money. So economic development programs that are publicly funded, how are those working? How are those being managed? Can you talk about some of the takeaways from that audit?
So, interestingly, initially what we wanted to do was evaluate the Department of Commerce and say, how well are they monitoring and tracking and evaluating the success of these programs? When we began the audit, it became very apparent, and they readily admitted they were not very good at this. But it was something that was an area of emphasis for them. So rather than just stop the project there, we decided where we could really help them was to give them a framework to help guide their process as they're building out a performance management system. So we did some of our own research, looked at other states, kind of came up with a way that they could frame setting a strategic direction and measuring progress of that. And then we also researched other states and regional economic plans to give them suggestions for, like, these are some of the things that you should include in this. And so, and then they're very receptive to that, and we expect them to implement a lot of that into their ongoing planning and evaluation.
And for context here, too, this was during a time of flux as far as there were some leadership changes during the period that you reviewed. Is that right?
Yeah, we started with the previous administration, and then we've had a change and gone to a new director there. The new director was very excited to hear that the project was in place. It aligned with some of his visions of things he was trying to do with the department.
I think that's the key. It is leadership. It is leadership at the organization level. Whether you're the director of the program, but you set the tone and tenor, and I think Director Wynn, or secretary, I'm not sure, but he has set a really good, strong, stable tone for what Commerce should be doing and how they should be functioning. And I think that's good.
One of the things that jumped out at me from the two-page sort of analysis with recommendations was that while there was sort of a focus on contract deliverables and making sure that, contracts were completed, but not tracking outcomes. There was some of that, but I want to say half of the. So, without tracking outcomes, how do you know whether the taxpayers are getting what they're paying for?
Yeah, exactly. In most of these cases, we're not doing these programs for the outputs, for the things that we directly contract for. We're doing this because we want to achieve some greater outcome. We want to create jobs. We want to develop businesses. I'm thinking in the economic development arena. And so having metrics that actually measure what you're really trying to achieve. And that's very challenging, but it's something that's really critical in order to really evaluate whether these programs are achieving what you'd like them to achieve.
Well, the auditor's office is uniquely positioned. I don't know about uniquely, but it's one of the few entities that really has a sense of just how much federal money is flowing into the various state agencies, state programs across the board in Washington. And I know that's been a focal point for you recently, looking at potential cuts, things that are being discussed, and the implications for Washington. What are your major takeaways on that issue?
Well, I think it's important to state that government doesn't function well with a lack of predictability. Government needs predictability to function good, to function as perfectly as it can. Is it perfect? No. But to do that work, you need to have predictability. And what I have been saying, and it's almost like a clarion call, you need to be prepared. In 2024, the local governments in Washington state had received about $6.2 billion in federal dollars. The state of Washington received $27.4 billion of federal dollars. Now, if the government wants to claw back those monies, they could potentially do that. So they need to be, I'm telling local governments that you need to be prepared. You need to make sure, and the state treasurer is doing the same thing, He's trying to explain to local governments and state agencies, we need to be prepared for any potential impact. And we're already seeing potential impacts. Some of it's ending up in the courts, and you can see what the AG's office has been doing to try and make sure that some of these federal dollars that are so critically important are received by the Washingtonians that deserve them, and we give companion dollars from the state. So these are challenging times because they're so unpredictable.
Are most of the federal, or I don't know if this is there a theme as far as federal funding goes to support this program, or is it just, in some cases, federal funding can support the mission of this entity too? So, which could sort of mix up the...
Well, I think it can be all over the board, as we've been seeing. And we don't know where that next, potential hit could be. So I think it's important for governments to be aware that don't be complacent. And for the public that may be watching this show, how's it going to impact you? Well, it can impact you in a whole host of ways. And because government helps to keep us functional here in Washington State. And we did so, maybe not perfectly during the pandemic, but we still kept the doors of government working, open and working through the pandemic. We're going to need to be doing that with this unpredictable time period that we're going through right now.
Up next, we'll spotlight cybersecurity audits, ransomware probes, and the role the auditor's office plays with safeguarding critical information services. Stay with us.
I love living in Olympia. It's one of the most beautiful places to live because of Capitol Lake.
This dam has no function. You're not even allowed to let your dog swim in that lake.
A pop-up ad delivered malware that raised red flags and led to an extended outage of a critical state court network last fall. One of the nation's largest water systems was recently hit with a cyber attack that took out billing services for millions of customers spread across a number of states. In recent years, the State Auditor's Office has been focusing more on preventing situations like that by conducting cybersecurity audits to check the security of government technology systems. Now we turn again to the Director of Performance and IT Audits for the State Auditor's Office, Scott Frank. Scott, when people hear about ransomware, that can block agencies from accessing their own systems. For hospitals, it can mean no access to patient records. Do you audit cybersecurity? Do you do cybersecurity audits for those types of entities, looking for those types of concerns?
Yeah, we do, and kind of in a couple of ways. One, we have developed a tailor-made audit program that just focuses specifically on ransomware. Most of our cybersecurity audits are very large engagements, and we wanted something smaller, more focused, that we get after something that was of great concern to many governments. And so we have developed an audit program off of some ransomware best practices to just focus in on the kinds of things that an organization needs to do in order to make sure that they're both well-positioned to prevent ransomware and resilient if they suffer a ransomware attack.
And how common is that? I mean, you hear about it enough, high-profile incidents, but sometimes you don't hear about it, right?
Yeah, I don't really have a great sense of how often it happens. I would imagine it's probably more in the teens, not the hundreds, in terms of Washington. But when it happens, it can be absolutely devastating if an entity cannot get to their operational records, and it can really put them in a bind operationally. It can be in a bind financially if they end up paying the ransom. So it's a big deal when it does occur.
When Hollywood talks about cybersecurity or cyber attacks, it might involve hackers targeting traffic lights or something to cause chaos in a city, or a 911 system. In real life, is that usually what happens, or is it a concern?
I think a big concern when I think of attacking things like infrastructure, it could be like streetlights, but I think what we focus on and we're worried about are things like our water systems, the agencies that deliver electricity, hospitals. And so that's an area that we've also tried to focus in on. And so a little different take on the way we audit that is we think about if you were a malicious actor on the other side of the world, how would you attack a water system here? Well, you do it through the internet. And so we've designed, again, a more tailored audit approach that really focuses on those external threats. And so we do testing to see, well, what can we get to from the internet? Can we get to any of the equipment that you're running in your water system or in your the power grid?
You actually do the penetration testing or whatever.
We work with a contractor who's able to do that, and we do it with full participation and in cooperation with the entity.
They know it's happening.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to scare anybody. We don't want to we definitely don't want to break anything in the process. But this gives them a real sense of like what anyone in the world might have the ability to affect, and we definitely find things that need to be shored up, and then they're on top of those things and address them.
How are they? I mean, in general, I'm not specific, but how protected are they?
I'd say that's hard to gauge. I guess I would say it can always be better. So when we do this work, we almost always find something that they need to tighten up on. That doesn't necessarily mean they're doing a bad job, but definitely our goal is improvement, and we figure everybody we audit hopefully walks away better when it comes to their security.
How is artificial intelligence impacting this?
It's still early, but a couple of ways. I think one that I think a lot of people may even see in their personal life is phishing attacks. So when you get emails that are trying to trick you into doing something, those emails are just getting better and better in terms of being more realistic, and artificial intelligence really aids in that. They used to be full of spelling errors and really awkwardly worded, and you could kind of, if you're halfway paying attention, you're like, this isn't real, but AI really helps in that domain. Another area on the positive side is that more and more services are starting to implement artificial intelligence to help comb through all of the monitoring data that various sensors and stuff are looking at to help identify potential attacks, and so it can be also part of the defense.
Just kind of an agency perspective here, how is it, what's your approach to managing so many different types of expertise and different programs that really are, separate career tracks?
Oh, it's true. And Scott's got some tremendous people. I think one of the people that we hired was a data scientist, and he's been worth his weight in gold because he can figure out ways in which to use technology to help us pinpoint where a problem could be in a government's finances. And it could be an internal bad character, or it could be an external bad character. But we have a tremendous expertise that have a wide range of ways in which they bring those skills and talents to our office. And I will say that cybersecurity probably is our biggest growing book of business. I mean, people are hungry for it. Governments are hungry for it. They want to do the right thing. They want to protect what they are overseeing, whether it's local governments or whether it's state agencies. So they really do want to do the right thing. And our efforts to give them that knowledge by doing whether it's white hat penetration testing or a whole series of different things that we do, it's been beneficial, and they appreciate it, and they want us to come back. So we've created a whole bunch of different ideas and our cyber checkups just for folks that just want to even look, am I complying with all the things I should be complying with? And so it's helpful work that we do for governments, and it's really in the spirit of good government.
Scott, when you look at how many agencies, how many operations are moving to the cloud for storing things off-site, does that complicate this? And if so, how?
I think it changes some things. It puts it maybe less in the control of the agency, more in control of the vendor. For some agencies, that's probably actually an improvement in security, because if they don't have the internal resources to really be mindful of securing things, it may get better security with a good cloud vendor. But it definitely changes where you're not in nearly as much control as you were when it was on site. When it comes to our audit work, that's something that we're having to evolve, because we've, over the years, had tailored a lot of technical testing that was designed for a certain environment where an agency is in control of their own servers and their own activity. And that all changes when you go to the cloud. And so we're having to develop new ways to evaluate that on their behalf.
What is a nightmare scenario? What keeps you up at night? IT nightmare scenario.
I suppose, especially as an auditor, I suppose would be if we've just completed doing some work at an entity and we've made recommendations, and then something happens there and it's something we didn't see. We can't find everything, but we think we're pretty thorough, and we think we find, the biggest things that an agency should be trying to address. And so if we were to miss one of those, I think that would be a big deal to us as the IT auditors.
I want to follow up on that, then I want to ask you about your nightmare scenarios too. So can you talk a little bit about the scale, the breadth, and the variety of the types of systems that you look at and the things that you see?
We will look at just about any type of system that a government has. When we do an engagement with them, we're going to find out what is important to them for us to take a look at. It could start with accounting systems. It could be their general environment. It could be an HR system. With the critical infrastructure audits, we're looking at systems to support actual physical infrastructure. So it's going to be a variety of things. Overall, some of the things that we tend to run into, I would say, just at a starting point, especially for the less developed security-minded organizations, are going to be just a lack of policies and really like where to start. So they may have picked up a few practices like, I should be doing this or doing that, but really having an organized approach to security. And so that's something with our initial clients that we try and impart. Pat mentioned we do some cyber checkups, which are an even smaller scale engagement that really just, hey, here's 20 things, let's evaluate these and get you started on that. And so a lot of our work, we're dealing with often smaller local governments that don't have a tremendous amount of sophistication, but that doesn't mean they don't have a fair amount of risk. And so trying to get them moving on that journey.
And it doesn't have to just be an IT-related nightmare.
Yeah.
What's your nightmare scenario, or a nightmare scenario?
If we didn't have state auditors across the country, as the current president of the Washington State, or the State Auditors Association, I will tell you that group of people that are part of our accountability across the nation do tremendous work, and we know that because they're colleagues of ours, and we see the work that they do for their respective states. And I think if you don't have an outside set of eyes looking how government functions, and when I say outside, independent, objective set of eyes, it could be disastrous for us as a state, as a country. So I think what would keep me up is knowing that we got away from really having that oversight of government. And that's not to say that government doesn't try to do the very best job. They do for the most part, but it's always with the knowledge that they're going to have an outside, independent, objective set of eyes. At least in the state of Washington they do, and many of the other states as well that have state auditors doing this same kind of work.
So we are almost out of time. I'm going to see if you can, in very condensed fashion, tell me anything we didn't get to or anything you wanted to reemphasize to close us out, and then we'll close out with you.
Sure.
I'm just real excited about just the breadth of the different types of performance audits that we're able to do. We hit on a couple of them, but really being able to delve in and help give suggestions to different parts of government and how to make those things work better.
All right. And closing thoughts.
I think that what's critically important for us to understand is that, and I'm going to be, a drumbeat, but that we have this oversight that is going on. We don't need to create entities to go out and do that oversight. We were all created, most of us created in our state constitutions, this kind of office, this kind of work. And so it's important, and I think people need to know. We need to tell our story. So I would highly recommend that any citizen or government or worker go out and look at our website. It's user-friendly, and it will give you a plethora of information about governments in Washington State, information that you have a right to know, and we put it out there.
We will have to leave it there. Thank you both very much for your time. We do appreciate it.
Great.
Vandalism at the state capitol building caught on camera. Security camera imagery released by the Department of Enterprise Services reveals some of the damage. That includes burned flags, a scorched rug, the tipped-over bust of George Washington, and more. The Washington State Patrol did make an arrest at the scene. Thank you for watching. Join us next Wednesday for more in-depth interviews you won't find anywhere else. See you then.